Hello and welcome to England Cricket on 99.94 Cricket Every Day. I'm Daniel Norcross of BBC's Test Match Special, Wisdom Cricket Monthly, the Zero Ducks podcast, various other bits and bobs. And I am, as ever, joined by the chief cricket writer of the Press Association, the puff pastry hangman himself. The ear defenders are back on and he's going to need it because he's about to drive into a tropical cyclone out in New Zealand. It's Rory Dollard. And today we are going to be looking at the upcoming England series. Will it happen at this rate, or will New Zealand just be underwater? They are having the most wretched time this summer, but we'll be looking at their preparation, anticipating what team they might put out if they actually get out onto the pitch. And I'm in South Africa. I'm in Newlands. I'll shortly today be heading off to Paarl because it's the Women's World Cup, and I'll be having a little look ahead at how England's tournament might pan out, and just running the rule over a shock result on the first day in front of a giant crowd in Newlands. It was disappointing for the home side, but it hints at a very competitive World Cup to come. England Cricket on 99.94 is your new home for England cricket content, and we will be dropping into your podcast feed and on YouTube or the 99.94 app several times every week. So please do rate, review, and subscribe. Thanks for joining Cricket's Conversation. First of all, Rory, my dear old chum, do look after yourself. This sounds end of days stuff.
Yes, we are being visited by Cyclone Gabrielle. We're due to get pummeled by the thing, as far as I can tell. I did pack a raincoat, but I was hoping not to use it on this tour. So it sounds like we'll be needing it. But the good news for England, who have become very, very laissez-faire about their warm-up days and their practice days and their net sessions, is that there's absolutely no bloody chance that they're going to have to net in the build-up to the test match because the place is going to be underwater and tied down and fastened shut with a big crossbolt. So we're going to be digging in here and hoping there's a test match to lift us out of our gloom on Thursday.
Well, obviously, fingers crossed on that, but let's head straight to England's preparation because we've been chatting via WhatsApp on and off, and it's been quite the jolly. I've seen the odd quote from the odd player saying it's not all about golf. Sometimes we're going and watching Brendan McCullum's horses, but it is a very relaxed. You said laissez-faire approach, but we're not here to be critical of it because England have won whatever it is now, 11 out of 12. The spirit of the camp seems to be high. Tell me, what has their preparation been and how did it go?
Well, this is a group of golfers with a very awkward cricket habit. That's what's happening at the moment with the England team. No, listen, it has been interesting, and it's very much a continuation of the, I guess they call it challenging conventions. And they decided that warm-up cricket, they had 4 days scheduled in New Zealand, in Hamilton, where I am now, against the New Zealand 11. And when we arrived, that had been cut to 2 days. And in the past, we've talked a lot about teams being undercooked and haven't had enough cricket leading into a series. And this team have lent hard into that. And they said, actually, those warm-up days, we don't feel they have the intensity to get us up to speed for a test match. They're not as useful as you might think. And they were more than happy to have one batting day, one bowling day, and the rest of the trainings happened in-house. Now, the only thing I would say, which hasn't necessarily been excessively well understood, perhaps, is that some of the training days they had after their bonding camp near Queenstown were supposedly, from what we hear, very, very intense. And I can understand that. I wasn't there. I didn't see the net sessions that they had in Taranga. But if you have watched Ben Stokes training in the build-up to a test match, it can be intense. It can be fierce training. And as captain, he would expect a pretty high standard of preparation. So I believe the team will be pretty well up to speed. But match fitness can be different. They have got 2 days of standing on the pitch and miles in the legs. They've got players like Stuart Broad, who hasn't been playing cricket since September. So there is a bit of an open question. Now, you mentioned Brendan McCullum's horse, and they were racing a few hours ago as we speak, and there was a highly tantalising metaphor unfolding should things go wrong in the first test, because the horse came out of the traps like a rocket, led from the front, got tired, faded away, caught up, lost. So England will be hoping that isn't the same thing playing out when they play the test match at Mount Maunganui on Thursday.
You don't know the name of this horse, do you?
I do, actually, and it does lend itself to plenty of headlines. It's called Defibrillate.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't need to. What an extraordinary name for a horse. Defibrillate.
I know. Well, yeah, I'm thinking about the puns as we speak. Don't worry.
Right, now you've mentioned the intensity of that training and that they've only done 2 days of it. But I suppose, we've got to remember the flip side of that, which is also New Zealand's players and how much 4-day, 5-day cricket they will have played. Because the landscape at the moment, this test series is taking place right in the sort of chunk of T20 franchise central, isn't it? SA20 just coming to an end, and PSL about to start, the BPL, the ILT20. So seems going to be slightly true, isn't it, of a fair few of the New Zealand players as well, I guess. And the weather in New Zealand has been so abysmal this summer. They've had an absolute nightmare. In Auckland, they were underwater and they're having an entire month's worth of rain in about 12 hours. So both sides, in a way, are they going to be a bit undercooked for 5-day cricket? And if they are, does that suit England's style of play better? Because they look to shorten the games anyway. I mean, I'm looking at the numbers in that warm-up game. Then we're going to get 6.5 and over England again, just to whack it to all parts.
When they batted in the middle session, because they actually had a slow start. They didn't score off their first 11 balls, I don't think, which is, you were starting to say, oh my God, has the mask slipped from Bazball? They hadn't scored, a couple of maidens. And then in the middle session, they scored at 7.9 and over. It was absolutely brutal. Harry Brook was launching the ball. He made 97 in the warm-up and just looked for all the world like he was ready to make it 4 Test hundreds in 4 matches. But yeah, New Zealand, they both have played Pakistan recently, so they've had a kind of similar experience. But I think the other thing that has to be said is these are two teams that know each other very well. England and New Zealand have been simpatico for quite a while. They play each other a lot. They move in the same spheres. Half of England's coaching staff is from New Zealand. They do know each other quite well. So when they get into battle this week, all being well, weather being well, it'll feel quite familiar, I think, because they know it's not an unusual environment for them to be playing. So it'll be interesting. I think whether New Zealand try and meet them a bit more than halfway in a way they didn't last summer, I don't know, because they won the World Test Championship. They're the reigning World Test champions based on playing a very orthodox, steady, do the simple things right, learn the basics type of cricket. And England have just gone so far the other way. And I don't know if we're going to get a culture clash or if we're going to get the first hint that New Zealand might be buying a ticket.
Well, the culture of English cricket is seeping into everywhere. Before we go to our first break, just a couple of little numbers that caught my eye from the England A tour, the Lions, if you like, to Sri Lanka. Hasib Hamid opened the batting. 2 balls he faced. He got 4 and was out caught behind. I don't know for sure if he was wafting in a wide one, but I like to think he is. And Hasib has talked about needing to be more aggressive to catch the eye of the selectors. And then Jamie Smith, a man that you will say I'm biased towards because of my Surrey affiliations. But I tell you, I've seen him a lot, and he's a very, very fine young cricketer, hitting England's fastest century, 71 balls to get that 100. That's Jessopian. The likes of Johnny Bear's going to look over their shoulder. The fastest 100 in an England Lions shirt. And he talked about, again, the need for aggression. So this is going across not just the team that's being coached by Brendan McCullum, but it's filtering across all the other coaches in men's cricket. And actually, I'm be interested to see, and I've asked the question a few times out here in South Africa, whether weirdly that culture, even of like men's Test cricket, might liberate even women's T20 cricket. Who knows? Because it does seem to be an attitude of mine.
I think absolutely is the answer to that, because I have spoken to John Lewis about this, and he is absolutely singing from that hymn sheet. He said, I worked with Brendan briefly in the summer. I got to sort of see how it worked firsthand. And I want my players in the England women's team to be really expressive. He said he talked to me about Nat Sciver-Brunt being a really, really top player, but he said, I think she can be way more dominant than she already is. She doesn't know how dominant she can be. And I'd like to find out how far that can go. So yeah, I think English cricket has got a real bee in its bonnet about this stuff, and it's almost every single level.
Who would have thought it? England, of all countries. It's now time for us to take a short break. After that, we're going to get into the weeds. Who are England going to select for underwater cricket starting next week?
You're listening to Cricket's Conversation on 99.94. Whatever your team, we have the show for you on podcast, YouTube, or on the 99.94 app. We have India, England, South Africa, West Indies, and now Sri Lanka covered. If you want to find us, the best way is to follow us on social media at 9994DM by downloading the 9994 app or Google 99.94 on podcast. We speak cricket.
Welcome back. So, Rory, you're close to the side. 2 Test match series. They're back-to-back Test matches. So the need for management of resources, player resources, might not be quite as acute as you would get in a 3 Test series back-to-back, as they had in Pakistan. But nonetheless, they've got options. Firstly, does the batting feel nailed on despite Dan Lawrence's quick-fire 80-odd, whatever it was in the warm-up? Does it feel like we're looking at essentially the same top 7 as England put out in Pakistan? And then what are the bowlers? Because Stuart Broad's back in the squad, Matthew Pott's back in the squad. Some guys are missing, some guys being rested. How do you see it panning out?
Yeah, I think the batting is settled and fixed. I think that top 7 just arranges itself as you would expect. I think Dan Lawrence did himself no harm at all by showing that he was definitely ready to play in that manner, and he played very aggressively. It was kind of a flat period part of the game, really. The bowling wasn't that great. The fielding was quite poor, actually, when he was batting. So I don't think that was a question of him gunning for the team, but it was a reminder that he can sign on to that stuff. So the top 7, exactly what you'd expect. I think the bowling might be pretty straightforward as well. I think they might pick Jack Leach as a spinner, and they might pick Anderson, Broad, and Robinson, because I think they are the top 3 in the pecking order. And this England setup has given up on overthinking itself. I think if it was 12 months ago or 18 months ago, we'd have had all kinds of clever talk about resource management and this guy's going to play Test 1 but not Test 2. I think they're going to pick their 3 seamers that they think are their number 1, which is Anderson, Broad, Robinson, and then they'll see where they get to next week. Now, the only crank in that is that Ben Stokes didn't play at all in the warm-up. His preparation has been even more relaxed than the people who did play. And as a result, we're told there's no injury concern over him, but you're always worried about Ben Stokes and his body holding together because his knee has become a real drag for him. And I suppose he would, if he plays a role in that attack, it would be as the short, sharp bouncers, get into them, that sort of aggressor role. And he needs to be fit to do that. He needs to be ready to charge in. If he's not, you look at Ollie Stone and Matthew Potts, and actually both of them in that warm-up match brought a bit more energy than the leading 3 seamers here in the squad. Stone bowled quick, and he bounced the ball. nice and short, hurried people up, and Potts bowled with great energy, really good energy on his first sort of return to this squad since his breakthrough summer. So that's the only kind of kink in the discussion. But just looking at how they got through their spells in that warm-up match, it looked to me like they were tuning Anderson, Broad and Robinson up for the test match.
Interesting though, isn't it? Because with Broad, as you said, he's not played at all. The birth of his child, congratulations on that and whatnot. But he's therefore not played in Pakistan, not played any other kind of cricket because he doesn't play franchise cricket. Ollie Stone has played some cricket in his return from back injury. Potts, they really liked, and he can bowl good long spells. So there is a bit of a danger, isn't there? If you go in with Anderson, Broad, Robinson, Leach, and Stokes, we saw in Pakistan, especially like the Karachi test, for example, did not bowl himself until fairly deep into the fourth innings, at which point he realised that, they're in danger of not winning this game in 3 days, which appeared to be the target. So he then unfurled like a 9-over spell on one leg, which was expert and marvellous. But it does expose a bit, but then is that us doing the overthinking? Because really, they look at Broad, he's got 560 odd test wickets. He's the obvious man for the job. I suppose they would argue that the way they play their cricket when they bat, it'll cover up for a bit of that and give the bowlers that bit longer to get into their spells and get going. But it does feel a little bit flimsy. I say flimsy. It feels precarious. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I just don't. Watching how when the spells, the top three front rank seamers, whatever, they got a spell each in each session. It looked like that was quite mechanical about getting them ready for action. Stuart Broad has been a bit light on cricket. He said, we spoke to him and he said, I think he said it was the longest he has not played a cricket match since he was at school. So, but he's a new father, so the whole thing's, as you said, the whole thing's flipped for him. He'll just be glad to be getting a few hours kip in between the sessions. So I think they're pretty trusting of people like Broad and Anderson. I think if Stuart Broad turns up day before the match, says he feels good, I think he plays.
Right. Now, for New Zealand, so just to remind people, if they've forgotten what England's lineup was actually in Pakistan, the top order would be Crawley and Duckett again, Pope, who's averaged 40 since he's come in at number 3, which doesn't sound massive, but for an England number 3, it's a pretty impressive.
Interesting, but we'll just break there for a sec, because I think it's important to say in the last few days, it's been messaged very clearly that Ollie Pope, we talked about the vice captaincy the other day on the podcast.
Yes.
And I very assertively said I didn't think Ollie Pope was likely to be captaincy material. Well, I was wrong, because Stuart Broad gave him a huge rap, said he's become really vocal, really important, influential around the room, and that he sees him as a dead set future England captain. And he captained the warm-up match in Ben Stokes' absence. So it does look like actually Ollie Pope is emerging as that leader of that generation. Yep.
I'm not massively surprised because I suppose he's the most regular player, and Harry Brooks recently come into the side. He'd come in after Root. He'd be at 5, Root at 4, Stokes 6, Folkes 7, and then Robinson, Broad, Leach, Anderson, I suppose, in that order. You just sort of throw them up in the air and see what happens, and look forward to the moment when Jimmy plays his first reverse sweep off his first ball.
Exactly.
So just before we go to our second and final break, quick thoughts on New Zealand. Where are they at the moment? Their side looks relatively settled, but what about Trent Boult? Because there's always talk about Trent Boult not wanting to play abroad because he wants to take advantage of franchises, but that he would be available for games certain games in New Zealand. A bit of a pick and mix approach. Is he on the horizon or not?
Nope, he's not going to play, I'm afraid. He was due to get back. I think the time and with the cyclone that we talked about might cause a problem here, but he was due to get back something like 24 hours before the first test from his franchise commitments. And understandably, New Zealand thought that was a bit tight to actually plug someone into the test team and just roll them out and play. So he won't play. And actually, it's his home test match, Mount Maunganui. Suspect I suspect he thought he had enough credit in the bank to turn up the day before and find his kit and get out there and play, but he's not going to be. So that is a loss. And at a time when we are looking at Test cricket and saying, does it still hold its own as the prime format of the game and the sort of elite example? A New Zealand team taking the field without Trent Boult because he's been bowling 4-over spells for a franchise. It sticks in the craw a little bit. On the upside,
in fairness, though, Rory, in fairness, they do have Carl Jamieson, Tim Southey, Neil Wagner,
back,
Matt Henry. They've got a lot of bowlers. They've got plenty to choose from. I suppose missing the left arm angle and just the legendary status of Boult and his runs at number 11. But you know what it does do? Gives Jimmy Anderson an opportunity to claim top spot as the leading run scorer in number 11 history.
Exactly. I'm sure he'll be gunning for that. Jamison's back. He played in the warm-up match. So he got injured in the English summer. Stress fracture of the back, I think. And has been out for 6, 7, 8 months, working his way back gently. So he played against England, and actually, he bowled very nicely. Actually, he is a very, very settled Test cricketer. The things he does naturally are very good. He bowled a few beauties. It wasn't a bowler's pitch; it was a batter's pitch. But he beat the top order once or twice, got 3 wickets. So I would have thought Jamieson certainly plays one of the 2 tests, but. I don't know, we haven't talked about it much, but it's a day-night test. It's a pink ball test. And England typically lose them by miles. So that's another sort of... England won the first test that they ever played in Edgbaston against the West Indies, and they've been roundly thrashed in every one they've played since overseas. So they have some ghosts to exercise there.
In fairness, a couple of them have been in Adelaide. And if you get the toss wrong at Adelaide and you don't have that pink ball at the right time, it can be a pretty unforgiving ball on a pretty flat track. So it will be fascinating to see. But I dare say Jimmy Anderson might be licking his lips if he gets the ball at the right time of the day.
I would also say, unfortunately, as well as losing the toss, that the Adelaide test in the Ashes just gone, the ball turned really, really helpfully. England dropped Jack Leach and ended up bowling Ollie Robinson as an off-spinner. So...
yes.
Things got a little bit crazy last time.
Those are the bad old days when England's selection was as crazy as Australia's is, where they drop Travis Head and play Matt Renshaw in the Border Gavaskar Trophy. But we're not here to gloat about that, although we might do a little bit more of that as the series progresses. It's time for our final break. After that, we're just going to be running a little rule over the Women's T20 World Cup.
If you love the language of cricket and want more, then head over to the 99.94 app and you can hear all of our podcasts and cricket commentary. We're adding new shows all the time and covering cricket series from all over the world. Be the first to hear all of our announcements by following us on social media at 9994DM. Welcome to Cricket's Conversation.
So welcome back. I'm in Cape Town and the Women's T20 World Cup kicked off with an opening fixture between South Africa, the hosts, and Sri Lanka. And the expectation was that South Africa would win. But actually, if you leave out Mignon du Preez, Dane van Niekerk, your captain, and you estrange your best top order batter, Lizelle Lee, those 3 batters between them are the 3 leading run scorers in T20 international chases for South Africa. Perhaps it's not such a surprise that they're not able to chase down 130. It felt a bit clueless to me at the time. It seems to have been proven so. But what it does suggest is that there's a little bit more depth in the women's game. Gradually, it's happening that we're seeing a side like Sri Lanka, who've not had a lot of cricket through COVID. They had a really tough time of it. They didn't have a single fixture arranged by their board for over a year, but well led by Chamari Atapatu. Enthusiastic in the field, a little bit sloppy perhaps, but they've beaten the mighty South Africa. What does it mean for England? Well, England are in the other group, and their group consists of Ireland, India and Pakistan, who curiously always come out of the draw together. It's one of those marvellous coincidences.
Ireland who just beat Australia.
Ireland who just beat Australia.
Talk about upsets.
They are the bottom-ranked side in the tournament, and they've just beaten Australia in a warm-up. And to complete that lineup is the West Indies, who are England's first opponents. Now, what I would say from having seen how they're getting on in training, I think we've got a fairly good idea how they're going to line up. We've got a fairly good idea that they've got a settled team. They've had that very long series in the West Indies, which was a massive mismatch. And under John Lewis, and you mentioned him earlier, there is a sense, I think, of trying to unleash the shackles for Nat Sciver-Brunt. We'll also be looking at to see if this is Catherine Sciver-Brunt's last series, because she announced her retirement from domestic cricket, not the 100 yet. I'm pretty sure John Lewis would love to have her around for the T20 element of the Ashes. I think starting to reach the point where, she's already retired from Test cricket, so the longest forms of cricket she's going from. But this is an England side, Rory, that's not had radical change, but has almost, without you noticing it, suddenly integrated a whole bunch of new, very talented youngsters. And looking down at some of them, Sophia Dunkley, we're used to her now. I think that she's been around for young. She's not.
Yeah.
A couple of years, and she is a really explosive batter. Lauren Bell is really impressing with the ball. Sophie Eccleston we know loads about. Sarah Glenn is a gun bowler in T20 cricket. So they've got, under the leadership of Heather Knight and with the experience of the likes of Danny Wyatt, Lauren Winfield-Hill probably won't play, you would imagine, but in and around the squad. They've got a really wonderful blend of youth and experience. Is it too arrogant and complacent to ask the question, though, how do they get close to Australia? Because, look, they may struggle to get out of the group, but you would think India and England are favourites to go through with the parlour state of West Indian cricket at the moment. Pakistan and Ireland very much emerging as forces. So you would expect England at some point are going to have a showdown with Australia, either in the semis, if they finish second in their group, or in the, hopefully for them, the final. What is the missing component for England's women, do you think, that still has Australia on top, daylight, and England?
Yeah. From speaking to John Lewis, I think he thinks the missing ingredient is actually already there. It does exist within the squad. He thinks that Heather Knight, who's played forever, super experienced, loads of caps, been all around the world, he thinks she's not peaked yet. He thinks Nat Sciver-Brunt hasn't peaked yet. Sophia Dunkley, Alice Capsey, Lauren Bell, they certainly haven't peaked yet. So I think it's not a question that they're missing this player or they're missing that type of bowler or this kind of batter. I think that John Lewis believes he can add a bit to everyone who's already there. And he thinks if someone like Heather Knight, someone like Nat Sciver-Brunt, even Sophie Eccleston, if they're not the best that they can be just yet, and there's a few more levels to explore with them, he thinks that is the way that you beat Australia. So the question I would have for you, I guess, is this quite a binary equation for England? Have they succeeded if they get beaten by Australia in the final? Like, is the only acceptable way for England to leave this tournament, is that like we kind of accept Australia are really good? Or is there a way for them to win or lose in this tournament or succeed or fail that doesn't involve Australia? Do you know what I mean? It seems like that's their destiny in this tournament.
Well, I think, yes, I think you're right. I think if they don't play Australia in a game, then it will be a failure, unless something extraordinary happens to Australia if they don't get through the group phase. But that's such a massive long shot, because the way the tournament is set up is that realistically, I don't know, we saw a shock yesterday, but realistically in England's group, it's 2 out of the West Indies, England and India. And the way West Indies are playing at the moment, it feels like India and England are so far ahead within that group, you'd expect them to go through. Now, on any given day, and we've seen it, India have beaten England many times, one day in 50-over cricket. England have been a bit better than them in 20-over cricket, but those sides in 20-over cricket have got great cricketers, and anything can happen when they play each other. But you'd expect them to be in the semis, and the question would then be, which semi-finalists do you get? I think for England, it would be a failure if they got through the semi-finals, weren't playing Australia, and didn't get through to the final, because any side on the other side of the draw that's not Australia, New Zealand, for example, Sri Lanka, they got through. South Africa, whom England dominated in England's summer, and they look rudderless, I have to say, under Sunili's captaincy and missing those three great players. There isn't a side other than Australia in that group that they should lose to. Now, we know they did against New Zealand in the Commonwealth Games in a medal match, but that was kind of the disappointment, I think, of not making it through to the final, and that just energy drained out of the whole side. So I think you're right.
I've got two quick fire questions for you, Dan.
Yeah, go on.
Two quick fire questions, right? Who will be England's player of the tournament?
Sophia Dunkley.
Nice. And will we see Mankad?
I sincerely hope so.
Feels like that's a story waiting to be written, doesn't it?
It does. And, on that note, I've got to go, because I've got to get showered, changed, and get out of my hotel room. I've got to be hot-footing it to Pal, because on the time of recording, it's England's first match day. The next time we get together, Rory, hopefully you will be safe and sheltered in a big sou'wester, probably, not in a temporary tent. And hopefully we will have actual cricket to talk about in the form of England's first Test match, and I will have some results from the England women's efforts in the World T20. So thank you for listening to England Cricket on 99.94, where we speak cricket every day. Please rate, review and subscribe wherever you enjoy your podcast. You can download the 99.94 app and follow us on Twitter at Norcross Cricket, in my case, and Rory
at the RVD.
He's so cool, isn't he? Effortlessly cool. The Silver Fox, the puff pastry hangman. Never miss out. Join our 24/7 conversation on social media and follow us at 9994DM. Cricket every day, your way.